keeping the awareness of the heart, the evocation of Shambhala. We gently open the eyes. So we will continue our journey in the Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhist spirituality, speaking about this amazing life described in the book A Step Away from Paradise. This story of a Tibetan Lama who opened or went to open a special land, which a Bayul, which is in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the very expression of a projection of Shambhala. And you remember the last satsang, those fascinating stories about how we come to question the common sense of reality or the normal sense of reality. And it was an invitation, see what happens to you after we go through all these stages and all this journey. As it was mentioned, all the tickets to Shambhala are one way. So that amazing dedication of the people who participated in that journey. We spoke last satsang also about that power of creating something with the mind, that science of imagination. Ibn Arabi was speaking in a completely different tradition, but the same phenomenon of radiating from the heart, not just the mental creativity, but from the heart. And what would be the difference between that? And thus we spoke about the realms of opportunity. Before going to that, I remind you that quote of Tulshung Lingpa from the guidebook to the hidden land: don't listen to anybody, decide by yourself and practice madness. Develop courage for the benefit of all sentient beings. Then you'll automatically be free from the knot of attachment. So this is like the tone of the whole journey, that divine madness beyond any limitations. We explained this quote as well. And we spoke about this is an image of the Bayul represented, of this Demoshong Bayul, or this sacred place symbolically represented in a Gompa, in a monastery in Sikkim. About this possibility and about the capacity of great masters to access such realms, to accept Shambhala, to come and to be in connection with Shambhala. There is a beautiful quote of the third Chantrul Rinpoche in the 17th century: I have journeyed to sacred places in utter joy, like a swan landing on a lotus lake, and the vase of my heart is filled to the brim with the nectar of their sublime qualities. This is not just a mental projection, or it's a journey that involves the whole heart, like a swan on this ocean of nectar of our heart, this Ananda bliss. And we spoke about the realms of opportunity, which according to Khentrul Jampel Rodro, contemporary Lama, they are, or we can create, or there are created such windows in space and time where conditions are present to produce a specific desired result. Bodhisattva create. So this realized being or people of love and compassion create these realms through actively shaping their own environment for the benefit of those who have karmic connections with them. So a condition would be indeed a karmic connection, the call, but then it's a matter of acknowledging. And he spoke also about this environment, this physical environment. So like creating a monastery or creating a place like this, or places in which people can meditate and can come and bring this self-awareness, it's a realm of opportunity. And then this can go even in a subtle way. So when the mind becomes subtle, both for the person who helps and for the disciple, all that transformation and the meeting of all these circumstances are happening not only in the physical realm, but also in more subtle realms. And you remember that we arrived to that story in which his master, Dorje Dechen Lingpa, while he was maybe a 10-year-old or so, took him together with another children, adepts, monks in that monastery, and there was a test. They were brought in a cave where a ritual was enacted, and then at a certain point he throws some rice in the air, and that image was created. So that subtle projection appeared with some purbas or ritual daggers, which were shivering, moving there in the air. Of course, all the children got scared, except for Tulshung Lingpa, who just held one of it and took it. So this taking from the subtle realm to the physical realm was a capacity which not even his root guru, his guru who was also Tertona, a great discoverer of dharma treasures, couldn't do. So he recognized his very special destiny, the destiny of Tulshung Lingpa. Now, still we should remain and speak a little bit about these purbas, because they have a very special relevance in general, for maybe even for us today. You see, this is a kind of classical purba, like a dagger, which has pointed shape, is like a tetrahedron, which is like a pyramid with three faces, and that is the pointing element in the end of it. There are many such special purbas, some done by meteorites or some special out of special metals, having a lot of spiritual power. There are also dharmas or spiritual treasures revealed not only by Tulshung Lingpa in the Buddhist tradition, like this one, and they are seen as a spiritual tool in different rituals. What is remarkable about this is that there is even a deity named Vajra Kilaya or Vajra Kumara or Dorje Purba. The Tibetan name is Dorje Purba. Dorje means thunderbolt. So we know already Dorje like Vajra, thunderbolt, and then Purba, this dagger. And there is a deity named Dorje Purba or Vajra Kilaya. Kila is dagger in Sanskrit. So Vajra Kilaya will be the Sanskrit name, and then Dorje Purba, the Tibetan name of this deity. The deity with the power to cut through any obstruction. So you can imagine such a deity which is really invoked in very intense rituals or in any intense situations when an immediate help is needed and to cut through all the limitations that we may have. And it's interesting the fact that Padma Shambhava, this great master, the second Buddha, Guru Rinpoche, the treasure Buddha, considered the second Buddha for the Tibetan Buddhism, had his first teachings about this Vajra Kilaya. Actually, he asked to be brought from India when he found a lot of resistance in that ancient religion, born religion in Tibet. He asked for this text to be brought, the texts and the teachings of Vajra Kilaya to be brought, and he gave this as the first teachings to his to his main 25 disciples or hard disciples. His main disciples would receive this initiation in Vajra Kilaya, in this fascinating deity which can eliminate the hindrances to the propagation of Buddha Dharma in Tibet. So this was how the spiritual teachings were able to radiate there. You have an image of Dorje Phurba. Sometimes it is representing having many faces, having in the palms of his hands Mount Meru, which is the very symbol of the axis of the world, as a Phurba as well. So the axis of the world becomes this tool of cutting any attachment, and his lower part of the body of this deity is a Phurba as well. So it's a dagger as well. So it's the deity which cuts completely any attachment, any limitation. Another image of Vajra Kilaya. You see the lower part of it is simply this Phurba, Vajra Kilaya, or this Dorje Phurba, the thunderbolt dagger. So this is what was practiced actually in this ancient Nyingma tradition. The Nyingma tradition is one of the main sects of Tibetan Buddhism, and it's the oldest one, and Tulshung Limpa was a part of it. So they were practicing very much this approach. Now, about the meaning of Vajra Kilaya, this deity is the deity of the Phurba, of the magic thunderbolt, which is seen as a tool of a sharp adamantine or unbreakable point of Dharmakaya, of this essential causal spiritual teachings, a wisdom generated to the power of one-pointed concentration. So when your aspiration is totally pure and there is no ego story there, it's just that determination, then it becomes like concentrated like a Phurba. We have in the Indian tradition as well, Kshurika. There is even an Upanishad, Kshurika Upanishad. Kshurika also means knife, dagger, or razor. There is even a mantra, Kshurika mantra, which helps cutting. And there it signifies yoga as a tool to cut oneself away from Maya, illusion, and ignorance. In a symbolic way, it was said that Kshurika would bring the suicidal of the yogi. So the ego is really cut through that. So whenever we have the tendency to go in bourgeois, ways of living, this Kshurika or this Phurba, like cutting, is the tool which will be proper. And in that Upanishad, Kshurika Upanishad, we have a beautiful quote which speaks about the metaphoric meaning of such a tool, because we shouldn't take it just as as a weapon for war, but it's a spiritual attitude there. When that knife or this Kshurika of the fixed mind, sharpened by breath control, so you polished the fixed mind by breath control, polished on the stone of renunciation, has cut through the weave of life, the yogi is forever released from his bonds. Free from all desires, he becomes immortal. Delivered from temptations, having cut through the toil of existence, he is no longer in samsara. So you see this beauty of cutting everything, polishing with this stone of renunciation. This is how the approach would be in such a path. And then there are even practical ways of approaching. How wrathful deity would be subdued with a Phurba. So how Padma Shambhava actually proceeded in many such situations. So in rituals of extremely wrathful activity, the image of a hindering spirit, of a enemy, somebody who is against the spiritual dharma, is pinned down with 4 small purbas, so small, the image, the effigy of that, with 4 such little daggers at the shoulders and knees, and then with a large purba piercing the heart. This sounds like magic, maybe in voodoo, or maybe you heard about things like this. And actually in the Western magic as well, in the that so-called sympathetic magic, through resonance, an echo can take place. But this can be seen in a spiritual way as well. Here, what is the meaning of all this? So the 4 small purbas represent the 4 immeasurables. So we pin with the 4 immeasurables, which means compassion, love, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. It's interesting that Patanjali speaks about the transformation of the mind using also these 4: compassion, love, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. But then in the middle of the chest, in the heart, the central purba represents pure bodhicitta, which means illuminated consciousness. So we put that, an altruistic aspiration to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So that light of consciousness you send to that. So this principle of resonance, yes, it works. And we see, as we said, it can function in magic, black magic, but it functions also in spirituality. The relics, so the relics are ways in which the devotees would relate to a saint or to a spiritual being. And then the same principle of resonance is there, the same echo. But then here you see all these are divine expressions, this simply aspiration to purify. So then Vajra Kilaya is the wrathful enlightened activity, and we should understand the difference between wrath and anger. The intention behind anger is to inflict pain and harm. No, it's an ego tendency. The purpose of Vajra Kilaya's wrath is to decisively remove obstacles on the spiritual path and to purify the spiritual pollution, the spiritual limitations. So when we send, it's like we send a blessing to such a person who would oppose us. No? So wrathful action and violent action may appear similar, but the motivations are diametrically opposite. And then manifesting Vajra Kilaya's wrathful qualities, practitioner swiftly subjugates obstacles to their inner development and defeat the enemies of compassion. So those who are going in an egotic way, by destroying their own self-centered egoism and negativity. Thus, the Phurba dagger, the great weapon of compassion, oriented in a threatening way, is meant to destroy demonic and negative forces, the forces of the ego. And in Vajra Kilaya practice, there is a particular emphasis to cut through and annihilate anger and vengeance. So it's exactly about sublimating this. So it's a completely different emotion that is happening there. So at times of when especially the negative is so intense and pervasive, is necessary to compassion to be accompanied, they say, by the power of the Phurba, by the power of this cutting discrimination and power. Now, of course, this discrimination may already exist for us, but such a practice, such a tantric practice to invoke Vajra Kilaya would be a practice in which, through deity yoga, so through the cosmic dimension of this purifying energy of cutting limitations, we refine our capacities. So to unite inseparably with Vajra Kilaya means to realize internally the qualities that deity represents: fierce compassion and enlightened action. So both together. It is not that the qualities of active compassion or wisdom that perceives reality, so that through self-inquiry we can see that depth. So it's not that they didn't exist before in us, but through this identification with Vajra Kilaya, or evoking such a wrathful deity, these enlightening qualities will manifest fully in our being. I mentioned this also because, especially in our times now, in these days, I was asked many times about the attitude related to the war in Ukraine, and many people told me that how can I change this anger? There is anger, there is so much anger in me. And this attitude is a very good answer for that. Indeed, just praying for peace in a passive way, peace can happen in many ways, like the conquering of a population which doesn't want to be conquered. So, and then the peace may come. So asking just for peace in just the passive way maybe is not the best attitude. In the end, of course, is God's will, and it's not just what we would want or we would think that is good. But still, since we can pray for peace, or we can pray, or there is a longing from a purity of our being, for a purity of intention, then why not ask for peace, but by the withdrawal of the limitations, and then pinning those people or those persons who are the cause, the physical cause of such a war, with this dagger of compassion. What if in the heart of such people suddenly bodhicitta would blossom? Then all our anger should be directed. It's an energy which can lead to frustration, which can lead to ego, a lot of stories, opinions, fights. No, we are not supposed to go into that. So this practice of such a wrathful deity invocation is about cutting our ego as well. So it's not about me going with my personal stories that, now that the war is going, my bank account may go low, or the price of the gasoline is going up, or it's not about any personal echo in that. It's just this longing for peace and truth in a fundamental way, dropping any opinions. And then in that beauty, you find that power, which is a divine power of bodhicitta, nothing else. That compassion and love in a very sharp way to transform things there. So I hope that this can bring some insights for us, how we can change this, or how these energies can be changed. And many people experience now such anger and pain and need to revenge and so on. It's not about this. It's not about this, but it's about sending that power of compassion. It's not by making other people to suffer that things will change. I mean, wanting to revenge in that sense, or inflicting suffering in others, but bringing that light of consciousness, praying to have that seal of Shambhala in their heart. You have also Yeshe Tsogyal is a legendary consort of Padma Shambhava, and you see in the image her left hand has a Phurba, such ritual dagger. Legends are speaking about her manifesting many such ritual daggers. There are many Phurba legends related to Padma Shambhava. For example, it is said that when he was in a sandalwood forest, the fire was burning that forest, and then Padma Shambhava pointed his Phurba at the fire, and it was immediately extinguished, and then also all the tree returned. This shows like a power over the fire element. Then Vimalamitra was a master, one of the 8 masters of Padma Shambhava. And also there are stories about him pointing the Phurba at the river Ganga, and then the waters part and stopping the flow of the river for some time. This is showing the control of the Nagas, or the deities of water, and of the subtle control upon the water element. And then another story about Sheila Manzo, who split the mountain, in hundreds of pieces by just pointing the Phurba towards it. These are legends which say that, or tell us that these masters were masters in the practice of Vajra Kilaya, of this deity yoga. But we have also some stories about Tulshung Lipa, about him going with this dagger, and splitting a stone which was hiding a dharma, but we'll speak about this maybe later. What I would like to share now is an amazing story that happened to him. So apart from the legends, beautiful legends, but we say, well, they are maybe just legends, maybe it's not so. No, this happened long time ago for Padma Shambhava or Vimalamitra. But now this is also a story that happened in our times, we can say, in this journey on the Beiyul towards that sacred hidden place. It's a story that was said by Vangyal Bodh while they were very up in the mountains, going to open this. There were just 12 disciples with him. And they tried, but there were a lot of storms and difficult things. And people started kind of doubting if this is the best approach and so on. So Tulsho Limpa chose this man to open the Beul, and they went they two together. And this is the story which the author of the book learned from this man. He was a powerful man in mid-20s at that time. Now he's in the late 60s as a retired civil engineer. And he said, "The sky at that altitude was so deeply blue, it was almost black. My heart was pounding. From more than just the altitude, I had the sense that with only the two of us, the way would open." So it was just him and Tulsho Limpa, and he felt that something will happen there. With a tremendous crack followed by a resounding roar, a piece of glacier the size of a house broke up, scattering boulders and crushing others in the path. It was slightly sliding down the valley directly at us. So imagine a huge piece of ice the size of a house coming towards them, and making the whole scattering boulders and so on. At that moment, Vangyal grabbed on Tulshung Limpa to save him, but realized that there was no chance that both of them will remain in the path of the glaciers. Terrified, he knew that this was the end. Though he had first grabbed on Tulshung Limpa to save him, when the Lama yelled at him to let go, Vangyal realized that he was now hanging on to him, to Tulshung Limpa, out of raw fear. So then he released from his grip, and then Tulshung Limpa took the Phurba and he whipped out his Phurba and held it before him at arm's length at the glacier, as the glacier crashed towards them, with a roar, holding the Phurba steadily, one arm outstretched and his other arm extended with the index and small finger pointing towards the onrushing wall of ice, his voice resonating such a profoundly deep note that the rumble of the oncoming glacier reverberated back on itself. His voice was elemental, pre-human, ha! And the glacier broke into two pieces and thundered by them left and right, leaving them unscattered. Tulshung Limpa tucked the Phurba back into his robe with a calm that was astonishing. Vangyal, so this man trembled with fright, awed by what just happened, shaken to the core. Now, the commentaries of the author was that he said that this man was a very calm, open, and honest man, which more than him cannot be imagined. He said, I had just been traveling some days with him, visiting people and places connected to Tulshung Limpa. I had found him sober, level-headed, and very exact in what he said. Exaggeration was not in his character. So the way in which he told the story felt very true, but still he wanted to ask, and it was embarrassing, but he tried to be diplomatic and said, people make up stories and exaggerate, especially when it comes to things religious. And he asked, did this really happen? To this, the man answered, absolutely. I am as amazed today as I was then, he said, staring me openly in the eyes. I also probably would not believe it if I hadn't experienced it myself, but it happened exactly as I said. Also, he said, when they came back from that, because Tulshung Limpa, at a certain point, she said, now is the time to come back, it's not the time to open. Let's bring the others as well. And he said that story, which was fresh at that time, to everybody, so everybody knew what happened, and it was just at that time. But even more than this, a shift in Vangyal's consciousness was very relevant. He said, speaking about doubts, but not that doubt, do I believe or not this story, speaking about that fundamental doubt in his master. And he said, the human mind is susceptible to all sorts of things, especially doubt. I realized that until this point, I had still harbored doubts. Now that I had experienced Tulshung Lingpa's power, doubt was no longer possible. The Yul Demo Shong was now a certainty. So for him, that was also a moment in which, after that, he realized, no, it's not, maybe it's a story or so. That was something that convinced him in the depth of his heart. And still, after that, when the echoes of the glacier faded down the valley, Tulshung Limpa turned to Vangyal and asked whether he wants to continue or not. And Vangyal said yes, without hesitation. Tulshung Limpa was happy. Finally, he said, a disciple with enough faith. So this is the story related to this Phurba story accounted by this man. Now, still, because I mentioned about that gesture which Tulshung Limpa had, it's a very interesting similarity with a picture of Ramkrishna. You heard about Ramkrishna, the greatest mystic, we can say the greatest mystic of India. Many considered him like this. In the 19th century, this man was seen as an avatar, as an incarnation of God. And this is one of the first pictures taken to Ramakrishna. And actually, he came to the house of Keshab, an adept of, or the leader of kind of elitistic Advaita Vedanta Brahmo Samaj, a group which went more on this kind of abstract non-duality, not so much devotion. But in that meeting, there was a renowned singer of Chaitanya or Hare Krishna, and that man sang, and then Ramakrishna entered in an ecstatic mood. He raised up, he took these gestures. Hridaya, his nephew, held him, because in that state he would not be very aware of his body, and he entered a state of samadhi. So this is Ramakrishna in a state of samadhi, coming in this very special state of consciousness in the bliss generated by that devotional music. Now, there is also something very special which I would like to share about such a picture. We spoke about images and the power of the creative power of the heart. Till 19th century, all the images of Krishna, Rama, the images of Krishna, of Rama, of the divine avatars, of the saints, of I don't know, Patanjali or Matsyendra and so on, are just images coming from the visions that some people have. This is the whole tankas, those flags in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, are just visions of some people. And then we come to see them, how that saint looked or how that archangel looked. So an expression of God through the imagination or through that visualization of a sage or of a person who was able to come in contact with the divine manifestation. But this was maybe one of the first pictures in which God, as an avatar, is revealing itself. So we can look indeed as the statues and pictures, as these statues of tankas and pictures, the images which other would make about some divine realities like Krishna. But here we have the image of God, Ramakrishna, as we have the image of Ramana. Not just as a projection, but in a painting, in a picture. So the picture was starting to be taken only in that 19th century, and it's from that time that we have the grace, the chance to see divine beings. And then we can connect exactly through that resonance we were speaking before. We can connect to these great sages in a very unique way, in a very intimate way. So it's more than just a picture. At a certain point, Ramakrishna said, imagine a vast, infinite field. This is the field of consciousness. But because of the ego, it's like a wall, and you cannot see that field. That field is in front of you, but what you see is just the wall. Then an avatara, a being, a divine incarnation, a being like Ramakrishna, is like a hole in that wall. And through that hole, you can see the infinite space there. So it is through the presence of a divine being, then something is shining there. It's a glimpse of the divine, which somehow echoes, and then you know that it is possible. You know that is not just maybe theory, you know in a very direct way. It's a epiphany, it's a direct manifestation of the divine. And Ramakrishna was like this hole in the wall, like Ramana Maharshi is as well. So coming to this Mriga Mudra or deer Mudra is the mudra which Ramakrishna made at that moment. Indeed, is like a deer, looks like a deer, which, especially when it sees danger, or it's all the time actually alert, is very present. A deer, when this would be the ears of the deer, and is very alert, is very present, is very aware. So this mudra is a mudra that generates this full awareness and also expresses this openness to the divine. It's like a full awareness and openness to the divine. In Natya Shastra, in the tradition of Indian music and dance, where different mudras are also involved, this is also something that suggests the infinity. So, and also can be found also in magic tradition, sometimes suggesting protection. It's a mudra for protection. And the other mudra that Ramakrishna has is named Ala Padma Mudra, the mudra of the lotus opened, suggesting the chakras that are open or evoking that openness of all the chakras. It is sometimes named Viragya Mudra, no, Abhyasa and Viragya, dispassion, no, the practice and the detachment, the two pillars of yoga. The detachment is the symbol of the other mudra which Ramakrishna shows. We have even in the image of Shiva, Mriga Mudra. You see, also Shiva manifesting this mudra of full awareness and full presence. Another correlation which we can still do with this Phurba would be with Vajrayogini. Vajrayogini is an important deity in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. He is seen as the essence of all the Buddhas. Especially in the sixth yoga of Naropa, a very important text of the Gelupa, mainly tradition, a text which gives the practical forms of yoga, like the yoga of Tumo, of the inner heat, or the yoga of dream, conscious dream, the yoga of projection of consciousness. Vajrayogini is the guiding deity. For example, Vajrayogini is also the expression of transcendence in the yoga of sleep, transcending, exactly as we spoke about Shivaratri, the night. She also expresses this night of transcending any duality and any limitation. In this Vajrayogini sadhana or spiritual practice, a phenomena source is the symbolic of the source of all phenomena. We may name it, as the Tibetan Buddhists would name, emptiness, or that spanda, or pure vibrating consciousness. No? And that is the source of everything. And therefore, it's like meditating on the symbol of Vajrayogini. So the phenomena source would be that which is the source of everything. Meditating on Vajrayogini as the source of everything, the very core of the very heart of Vajrayogini. What would be the very heart of Vajrayogini? A double tetrahedron. A double tetrahedron. Now, what is a double tetrahedron? A tetrahedron is exactly what we said, it's a Phurba. No, this is how a Phurba looks. But now imagine two Phurvas going together, they would create such an image which has like the Star of David at the basis. It's a pyramid with this basis. This is, even as a practical tool, it can be a crystal on which they meditate. So this is a way of meditating on Vajrayogini. Now you have even the Vajrayogini mandala, which again is the Sarva Buddha Dakini, Sarva, all. So the Dakini, who is the essence of all Buddhas. And you see there are these 6 angle star, which is exactly what we were speaking about. And this is in reality, so it's not just a two-dimensional projection, but is in space, this. No? And this is how it appears also with these circles. In the previous image, you can't see them here. Now we can look at this and see the very core of Shambhala yantra being this, pointing this 6 circles like the points of this star of Vajrayogini, 2 Phurbas, or this pyramid, which can be visualized as pointing to the depth of our heart. So from the yantra of Shambhala yantra, pointing, the middle circle being the very tip of this pyramid, pointing to Shambhala yantra. So you have the whole Shambhala yantra, and see in the middle, this is like a pyramid, the essence of all the Buddhas, Vajrayogini, having as its symbol the very pointing to the heart. Yes? You remember in one of the first satsangs, I made a correlation between the 5 Dhyani Buddhas and the yantra of Shambhala. So you have the yantra, you see, with these 5 circles or places, and in a very similar way, we have the 5 Dhyani Buddhas or celestial Buddhas, which are actually divine deities, or deities that can sublimate personal emotions or limitations in connections with the elements. So emotions in connection with pride, with attachment, with anger, sublimating them to divine qualities. So basically this would be a way, even in the meditation with Shambhala, will be a way of sublimating and purifying all our emotions, in a very subtle way. Now, I mention this again because, and you see again an image very similar with what Shambhala would, the Shambhala yantra would represent, because, again, related to anger, there is a deity, Akshobhya, which is at the east here in the Buddhist iconography, is the down in what we will name south, is in the Indian and Buddhist iconography east. So here is the east. Amitabha, Buddha Amitabha, is at the west. The western paradise is here, but here it's Akshobhya, which is particularly useful for invoking when there is anger. Again, referring to that feeling of anger. Anger and hate can be sublimated in the mirror-like wisdom. It's a part of what is named Vajra family, and the color of it is blue, exactly as that stability of the ocean, which is blue, the depths remain undisturbed, and Akshobhya is the mirror-like wisdom. It's actually the wisdom of the witness consciousness. So invoking Akshobhya is like a way of bringing back that awareness of the witness. And then many wrathful tantric beings are represented as blue in color because they embody the transmuted energy of hatred and aggression into wisdom and enlightenment. So this was like a parenthesis for, again, supporting those who said that had different challenges in these times with anger and different such emotions. Now we come back to the story of Tulshung Lingpa. Was a young man 18 years old, when he went to monastery to give, in central Tibet, to give teachings. For 3 months he was there. He was already renowned as exotic Lingpa Terton from Golok, the monastery where he lived. And he started giving these teachings for 3 months. A nunnery was close to that. And there was also a woman who was not a nun at that time, but she was a member of a very respected family of high order lamas from the Gelup tradition, so from a different tradition. And she asked her parents to go to participate to these teachings of Tulshung Limpa. And after 3 months, she was completely in awe, fascinated both by the presence of Tulshung Limpa and by his teachings. So she addressed him in the end and asked where she can withdraw because she wants to become a nun, and ask for advice. To this, Tulshung Limpa said, it is not necessary for you to become a nun. Come with me, let's go together. So he used to be a respected lama, the head of the Golong monastery. He just took this woman. It was a very powerful attraction, of course, and they left. It was a kind of scandal because, as I said, she was a part of a family which was like, imagine a conflict between a Catholic in the very kind of dogmatic kind of family, marrying a person from a Baptist or whatever sect, Christian, other sect. So it was a kind of scandal, but they didn't care. So they traveled. It was like a pilgrimage. They went first to Bodh Gaya, so the place where Buddha attained realization. Then another sacred place in Sarnath, where Buddha gave the first teachings in that so-called Deer Park. And then they went to Revalsar Lake, which was considered at that time maybe the most sacred place for at least for Vajrayana Buddhism. And it may be like this now as well. It's named Tsopema in Tibetan, the Lotus Lake. And before speaking about their life there in this Tsopema, this is a like troll. It's very much, this Revalsar has the flavor of Padma Shambhava. There are caves, many caves and where Padma Shambhava put his marks there and his presence. And the story says, so briefly, maybe many of you already know, but the story says that before giving teachings in Tibet, Padmasambhava passed to the kingdom of Zahor, where a beautiful princess, Mandarava, was there. The king had this beautiful daughter, and many Maharajas wanted her as her daughter-in-law or so. And still, this Princess Mandarava had a strong spiritual aspiration, and Padmasambhava came to give her some teachings. She fell in love, and it was so inspiring, all the teachings that she received, that they became lovers. So she became a consort, one of the main consorts of this great Tantric master, Padmasambhava. when the king found out, was very angry, so he punished her, but mostly Padma Shambhava. He made on a flat area a pile of wood, and he caught Padma Shambhava and put him on that pile of wood, and then set aflame all this. Instead of perishing in the fire, Padma Shambhava transformed all that fire into a lake, this Revalsar lake. So this is how this happened. And in the middle of this lake, Padma Shambhava appeared with Princess Mandarava. So they were together in this loving embrace that was so impressive that the king not only allowed Mandarava to continue her teachings, but allowed them to be together. And the whole kingdom of Lahore was converted to Buddhism. So it was through this that kingdom was converted to Buddhism. So this is the legend and the story behind Revalsar Lake, and even now it is seen as one of the most powerful spiritual places in Vajrayana Buddhism. There they stayed in an abrupt area there for many years. Tulshuk Limpa, with these are images with Padma Shambhava and Princess Mandarava at that time in union. And basically at the age of 20 or so, he arrived there, and he started healing. He knew Tibetan medicine. He could see through his clear vision the causes of diseases. So he became a renowned healer there, and he would perform rituals and so on. Then he was a very gifted painter, so he painted the monastery, the Nyingma monastery of that area, with images from the life of Padma Shambhava. So again, expressing some visions that he would have about this. During this time, he was invited by many to take over their monasteries. So many people would come and invite him in their villages to take over those monasteries, but he constantly declined till he accepted one in Panji Valley in Lahaul district, monastery over 3,500 meters up, quite harsh climate, especially in the winter, and he would stay for some time there, for sometimes in Revalsar Lake in this area still, just to give you an image of that whole area, how this would look. It's like a paradise there. So Kunsang, the son of Tulshung Limpa, said that he and his mother and Tulshung Limpa lived in Panji for 15 years. And his sister Kamala was born there. In these times, just some miracles happened. Once, he was invited by a sponsor, these people not working for money and so on, would have people who'd support. And it was a sponsor who invited him for some rituals in a village where was a very renowned statue of Kenrezi, the Buddha of compassion in Tibet, maybe you heard Avalokiteshvara, is Khenrezig, is the Tibetan name of Buddha Avalokiteshvara. So this Buddha of compassion. And there was this statue of, very renowned statue of Avalokiteshvara in this temple. But Tulsung Limpa had a vision at night, and he told his disciples, there were some disciples with him, and he told, tonight we have a big work to do. Big word, but don't tell anyone. And anyhow, they fell asleep. The disciples and even get drunk because the man who was there gave them some liquor, some alcohol, and they were just in sleep. At 2 o'clock, Tulsung Limpa woke them up and took them to this monastery. They went around the monastery like this, circumambulation. Going around the monastery is like a practice that is done always clockwise. Kora is named in Tibetan. And they went 3 times. And then Tulsung Limpa said, can you tell me where is the heart of Khenrezig Buddha? So they were outside of the temple and looking at the wall. Imagine the wall of the temple from outside, and he said where the statue would be and where is the heart of the statue there. So he said, last night in my dream I was visited by a Dakini. She told me to look behind the heart of Buddha Khenrezig. So he simply took that as a order, and he was trying to find, and he asked these 2 disciples of him. They came with some opinions. The statue should be like this, so the heart should be there. The other had another opinion. Tulsung Limpa said, no, it's there. And he made with a stone, a scratch on that dry mud wall there. And he simply asked, get a hammer, something we can smash the wall with. They were completely shocked. But Master, this isn't our temple. We can't just smash the wall. No, get me something to smash the wall with. They were, but Master, where can we find a hammer? It's the middle of the night. So all these questions, but one of them, Namdron, knew that when a Lingpa, a Terton, such a man of vision has such an insight, you cannot contradict or you cannot just go in doubts. So he went and found the thick metal bar which was used to bar that metal rod which used to bar the door of the temple, and brought it and went and hit the wall, and then a big crack and a big hole was done in the wall. They were completely surprised, and they didn't expect to be such a huge hole there, and they were looking around, fearing that somebody would see this act of vandalism. But Tulsung Limpa simply looked with sharp view, exactly as, in that metaphor Ramakrishna said, it's like a hole through which you see the reality. He would look with that eyes inside there. He didn't care about all the story of smashing the world. He simply went to see. And then he brought a tiny piece of paper from there, and all exclaimed, it's a it's a treasure, it's a dharma treasure. And then he took it and he said, now I have work to do. You fix the wall till morning. So they had to fix the wall till morning, and then he didn't sleep that night, and then it took some days for him to fully unfold the message. So it's like translating, he would say, from a celestial language to the Tibetan. So it's not just few letters that would enter there. He, in a state of special consciousness, would write. And he wrote 2 volumes of such pecha, or books, Tibetan books, you know, that books on leaves, of 300 pages each of them. So 2 books of 300 pages. But because he was writing in a very hasty manner, he asked one of his disciples, Neem Karoli, to rewrite it. And he did this with the first volume, but then the second volume took him a lot of time. So the son of Tulshung Limpa, who came to know all this from the disciple, what happened and what was behind all that story, what happened with why his father was staying so long there. So found the whole story, but for the second volume of the book, it took a lot of time, like 1 month and so on, and Tulshung Limpa became angry. And then they realized that actually some lamas got the point that it was a dharma, a sacred book there, and they paid him, and he was making a copy to them. That's why it took so long. And anyhow, this dharma still exists. There are books about the ending of suffering, and about the great heart of Buddha Khenrezi and the great heart of Buddha of compassion, this Avalokiteshvara. So this is one of the stories. Another story, briefly, it's about the remembrance of his last life. He said, in my last life, my name was Hiarai Lama. So in a completely informal way, he just confessed to some people. And these people asked and insisted, please show me what is the place? Is this, the place is quite near, he said. So they went and looked at that place. So some remnants of that. He said, in that life, I died quite soon. It was a man who got sick, and I went to do some rituals. He was still a lama in that time. And I went to do some rituals to restore that power or prana, or that principle, la, vital essence in Tibetan. So he was doing such rituals every day, but every day he would pass with his horse through the land of an old lady, or lady who was not at all happy of this, but it was the only way to go to that place. So the lady became so angry that she decided to kill him. So knowing that he would go in the night, he made a big hole, and just like a trap for him. And then Tulshung Limpa said, what she didn't know was that I had secret insight. I knew that what she was going to do, and that I would die. Yet I chose to let her kill me. I knew that after I died, she would be so repentant that she would become a hermit, devotee herself to the Dharma, and reach enlightenment. I choose to sacrifice myself to her enlightenment. So this degree of compassion and insight that appears, and we can find such stories in the teachings of Buddha, when he would speak about the times of realization of each of his disciples, and many stories that suggests that both for Buddha or for Padma Shambhava, they had this insight of seeing beyond just the causality of these times. So they went and they dig in the place where when he said that it will be the place, so they looked around and they dig there, and it was a huge stone. They initially couldn't take it out. He said, take it out. It was a stone that was thrown there by the lady after that woman, on the body of the man. So when they finally managed to take that stone, it is said, to our great amazement, on the underside of that stone was the imprint of the dead Lama. He had died with his hand on his hip and his elbow sticking up, which was clearly impressed in the stone. Now, another story, which is, I would say, even more impressive, and actually this brought the fame of Tulshung Limpa before he opened the Peyul, is what happened when somebody approached him to save some people which were suffering of leprosy. This place is named the place of the female cannibal. Shimoling, this is what means in the valley of Lahaul. In this valley also Nicholas Roerich speaks about this magic area in his book about Shambhala as well. Anyway, in this area there was this village which was abandoned by many people, and everybody was avoiding this area. It was also a monastery which was abandoned as well. Everybody in fear that this disease will affect them. So they found in this region that their fingers, toes, ears, and noses being slowly eaten away and disappearing, the open sores refusing to heal. So we may name in our times an epidemic of leprosy, but to the people of Lahaul, it was the work of an unknown spirit. Now, what is the approach of the Tantric medicine? While the physical cause is not denied, so a Lama would be quite capable of understanding the physical role of microbes in a disease or of whatever would be there, he wouldn't see the microbes as the root cause. So it's a secondary cause. Now, the way in which in the physical realm that situation happens. But the root cause, it's a more subtle cause of that. And he would ask a further question: why was this particular person or community being affected in this particular time? To answer that, he would make investigations in the hidden realms. He was acquainted in the realms of spirits and demons. So trying to understand at a subtle level what is the reason behind what was there. Now, we have the confession, again, a first-hand confession of a man, this man Chokshi, from Shimoling, from this place of the female cannibal. This man was a young man at that time, and he didn't want to live. His relatives had this problem, he didn't have yet, but he decided that something needs to be done. So he went to the highest and most revered Lama in the valley, Kungpa Rinpoche, and said about his story, about the story of the village. The Lama knew it anyhow, and he started making some divination trying to understand why that is happening and what would be the solution, how to stop that. And after consulting some pecha, so such text, and then also throwing dices and so on, and doing many such phases of the divination, he came with this conclusion. The situation in your village is extremely serious and fraught with dangers. I'm afraid it is beyond my powers to help you. But there is a high lama at the monastery in Panji. His name is Tulshung Lingpa. My divination shows that only he can help you. At that time, he didn't know about Tulshung Lingpa, about this Chokshi, this simple man. Didn't know even about Panji. Was a simple man there. Before going further, still, some explanations about this Mo divination. This Mo divination is a way of predicting future or going into the structure of reality by different means than just the scientific means. So the answers given by the Mo are regarded as coming from Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. We have Avalokiteshvara and Manjushri, Bodhisattva of compassion and wisdom, as the most powerful Bodhisattvas. And it is like this Bodhisattva of wisdom suggesting that is, you connect to that sacred wisdom while doing such a divination. The Mo prediction manual is based primarily on the Kala Chakra Tantra. So Kala Chakra Tantra is the science revealed to Shambhala. So it's what came at a certain point from Shambhala in the 11th century. So it's essentially related to all the Kala Chakra tradition is related to Shambhala. And so the prediction is coming from this Kala Chakra Tantra, and then the Ocean of Dakinis, another text which is very much related to that. We have Manjusri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. He holds also a sword. Now, I hope it's not a question. We understand how this can cut. It's exactly the wisdom that cut any limitation. Now, to use Mo divination, one must have a question in mind, to think about something very clearly, and then roll the dice. The dice's outcome will indicate the answer in the prediction manual. Then the answer in the manual would answer your question, but may need some interpretation because sometimes this comes in a very symbolic way. The Dalai Lama, for example, consults Mo divination when making important decisions. So even for some, even regarding history or important decisions, Mo divination was used. Maybe we are more familiar with the I Ching, with that book of changes in the Taoist tradition. It is translation which was done, the first translation of Richard Wilhelm, and it was a foreword to that translation given by Carl Jung. In order to write this foreword, he made a divination. So he used I Ching to see the signs, what he should write there. So he took the spirit of that and he tried to express, to enter completely in that kind of thinking and kind of understanding. And I will give you the forward, a part of that which I consider very relevant, because it's also a way of opening ourselves to these subtle realms, and the explanation that Jung brought to that, which maybe maybe it's more easy to understand from our rational Western mentality. So Jung, in the foreword to the I Ching, to this book of transformation about divination, yes, he said, "For more than 30 years, I have interested myself in this oracle technique or method of exploring the unconscious, for it has seemed to me of uncommon significance. Our science," he said, "is based upon the principle of causality, and causality is considered to be an axiomatic truth." He refers mostly to this mechanical causality, not just a cause, a physical cause should have some physical echoes as well. But a great change in our standpoint is setting in being accomplished by modern physics. He refers to that observer effect, the fact that in physics, the fact that you are an observer of an event changes the event itself. What Kant also said, it's that you somehow influence that. Your mind, your way of seeing changes the event itself. So things are not just mechanical interactions, but is also this subtle way of your participation, your presence, your dogmas, your mind, your openness or not to the event. And in such divination, this becomes essential. So he said, "The Chinese mind, as I see it at work in the I Ching, seems to be exclusively preoccupied with the chance aspect of events. What we call coincidence seems to be the chief concern of his peculiar mind, and what we worship as causality passes almost unnoticed." And he gives an example. He says, "It is all very well to say that the crystal of quartz is a hexagon prism." So any crystal quartz is a hexagon prism. This is the shape of it. The statement is quite true in so far as an ideal crystal is envisaged. But in nature, one finds no two crystals exactly alike. Although all are unmistakably hexagonal, the actual form, however, seems to appeal more the Chinese sage than the ideal one. So you see, we have a crystal, an example of a crystal, quartz crystal. All these are hexagonal, but some crystals are in a form or in another. None of them are identical. And that subtle change between one and another is exactly what Jung was pointing in that, theoretically all should be the same. But then the differences are exactly in this subtle, this kind of chance element, that unknown thing or more subtle thing which is there. So he said, "Thus it happens that when one throws the 3 coins or dice or whatever would be the method for divination, these chance details enter into the picture of the moment of observation and form a part of it. A part that is insignificant to us, yet most meaningful to the Chinese mind. So why now, when I'm thinking about that, things are appearing exactly in that way? In parapsychology, this is named psychokinesis, the influence of the mind upon matter. But Jung put it in a more of a subtle way. So whatever happens in a given moment possesses inevitably the quality peculiar to that moment. This is not an abstract argument, but a very practical one. There are certain connoisseurs who can tell you merely from the appearance, taste, and behavior of a wine, the site of its vineyard, and the years of its origin. And he continues with people who know astrology, and then they can tell you the birth sign and many details of your chart simply by such a subtle intuition, that which is beyond just the raw mechanical causality. This principle that I have termed synchronicity, a concept that formulates a point of view diametrically opposed to that of causality. Synchronicity takes the coincidence of events in space and time as meaning something more than mere chance, namely a particular interdependence of objective events among themselves. So what things are interacting in a cause and effect mechanical way, as well as the subjective psychic states of the observer. So how we participate there, that is also a very important aspect. The synchronistic view tries to produce an equally meaningful picture of coincidence. How does it happen that A, B, C, D, so four events, two physical, two subtle, appear all in the same moment and at the same place? It happens in the first place because the physical events A and B are of the same quality as the psychic events C and D, and further because all are the exponents of one and the same momentary situation. Maybe the most renowned example of a synchronicity is when a patient was explaining to Jung a dream about a scarab, that beetle. He had a dream of an Egyptian scarab, and while he was speaking about that, they heard a sound in the window. It was at the 7th level of a building, so it was quite uncommon to hear a very strong sound. And they went to the window and they saw there, it was a beetle, a scarab, very much similar with the one the man was dreaming, hitting the window exactly as that time he was saying the dream. So this is a synchronicity, no? An example. Many times in our lives, such things are happening. Things with apparently no connections, no? Start happening. What is the connection between that dream and the fact that he was speaking about that dream in that particular moment, and the fact that a scarab hit the window there? All this coming together, physical and psychological events, and this is the synchronicity, and this is how we can understand. It's still a causality, but it's a causality that integrates subtle realms as well. Anyhow, coming back to the story. So this man, I hope that this can bring us a perspective about how a divination may make sense and how Jung presented that. This man was decided to find Tulshung Limpa. The Lama told him that he is not in that monastery, but for that moment of the year, he lives in Tsopema in Revarsal Lake there. He said that it took for him a few days, because he didn't have money for bus, it took a few days to arrive to that place. And then he found Tulshung Limpa. And this is the first confession, the confession of the first meeting. At that time, he had two young children, Kamala and Kunsang. I never seen anything like it. He lived with his wife and children in a cave on the sharp slope above the lake. I had heard of lamas and yogis living in caves, but never with their families. I was a little afraid of this man with burning eyes, the air of a great yogi with clothes of an ordinary man, Chokshi said. He told him about the whole situation there, and he said he listened carefully and I sensed in him a compassion that would bridge the fear that everyone else felt of even stepping foot into my village. His compassion enabled us to have compassion for ourselves. He said that all that time, after being avoided and isolated and having helplessly watched the limbs of our parents, uncles, aunts, brothers, sisters, and finally ourselves slowly vanishing into such wounds, Tulshung Limpa's arrival gave us the hope we'd lost. So his compassion enabled us to have compassion for ourselves. Like a doctor arriving at an accident scene, he showed not the slightest horror at our disfigurement, handling our wounds and trying to heal them with Tibetan medicine. So that, when you go with that firmness of an attitude which you are not taken by stories, exactly as Parsifal going to the Fisher King in the stories of the Holy Grail, not looking of why people are sick, why the king is sick, just looking for that cause, looking for the source, remembering the essential question. So he tried to heal them, but then he went to the monastery starting to do rituals. He went up to that monastery, and they said that they could hear the sounds of the drum and the tight-bone bells and trumpets all day long and all night long. So he did this for a while, and still nothing, no change was produced. Then he decided to go in a meditation retreat, and he meditated till a vision came. It was an entity indeed who was the cause of this, and then he even made a sculpture of that Nagaraksha, the kind of king of the demons of the snakes, and asked one of his disciples to paint it in this way. He said that the communion with this spirit made him understand that it was just a revenge, because these people were starting cutting the trees at a spring. It was a spring there quite close, and people started cutting the trees, and it's a confession. The man said, when the disease started eating our bodies, greed has come over us, and we cut the trees at the spring even more to build houses. So in a kind of vicious circle, they did even wronger. They amplify the cause of that suffering, cutting all those trees. And we have an explanation which Tulshung Limpa gave, which should be seen for the whole planet. Cutting trees at a spring puts the earth out of balance and causes disturbances in the spirit world. Your disappearing flesh is the result of the Naga's anger. It is because of that we now have the demon himself, Nagaraksha, before us. But then he said, until now the leprosy has been eradicating you. Now we will eradicate the leprosy. So big ritual was done for many years, for many days there, and in the end they had a mandala, an offering, and then they put some grass, dried grass, to set it aflame. But before putting the flame, the whole mandala started burning, and they realized the power of Tulshung Limpa, and they realized that this was possible. And then indeed, after that, no one had in that place anymore leprosy. Now, of course, we may ask, is it true? Is it possible? And so on. The author makes a remark. When I went to Shimoling and surrounding villages to do research for this book, I was frankly skeptical that ritual could eradicate leprosy. All the older people remember the incident. Every one of them attested to its truth. More than this, the people from there gathered and offered him, was like the monastery was a common property, and they offered him as a sign of gratitude the monastery. And they signed for that monastery. And because they were illiterate, some would sign with their finger, with the right finger, some they wouldn't have the right index finger. And there were people signing even with the right thumb or with the big toe of the right foot, because they didn't have other fingers to put there. So this is the story of him healing this village. Of course, this brought a natural sublimation of the energies there, because from that fear that was there in that area, and the entire valley felt about Shimoling, that turned into a tremendous respect. So it is said that the wounds all healed, and the fear the entire valley felt towards Shimoling was turned to a tremendous respect for the man who had delivered them from such fate. People came from far away to be healed by him. When I asked one old man who knew Tulshung Limpa in those days what he thought it was that gave Tulshung Limpa such healing abilities, he said it was his great compassion. So we may see these stories with miraculous happenings, and still behind all of them, it's this love and compassion. It is something also to understand related to Padma Shambhava. So Padma Shambhava, especially for this Nyingma, old Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist tradition, was a model. But the way in which he brought Buddhism in Tibet was not just by threatening them with hell, or just by reading Buddhist books or teaching them in a nice way. He was fighting the demons. He was going in this, facing all that oppositions. And this was actually a model. So for Tulshung Limpa and all this, for many great lamas in Tibet, this is the model. It's not Buddha, the model, as is Padma Shambhava. So all that, what I told you about the Dorje Phurba, that deity Vajra Kilaya, and all these aspects are very much related to this sense of a master, which was like a spiritual magician. And that culture is so much present, and we see now in all these happenings there. And this is the monastery, Shimoling Monastery. As a connection with this, I will conclude with something quite similar that happened in India in our times as well. Maybe you heard about Neem Karoli Baba. This guru was the guru of Ram Das. Many miracles are associated with his life. But a disciple of him, a doctor who just finished the university and remained there, miracles were related to the way in which he came there as well. But anyway, this doctor stayed in the ashram with a sannyasi clothes, with a long beard, a hippie doctor there. Till some years passed, and Neem Karoli Baba said, go. It is for you to go now and heal the smallpox. You know, the smallpox is that quite terrible disease which affected at that time 200,000 children in India. It's a virus, but very powerful. 1/3 of people would die, mostly children, and those who would be healed would become blind, many of them. So it was a terrible thing. And he went to the United Nations mission in India, say that he wants to do this. He was refused. He said it was humiliating, and he came back to Neem Karoli Baba, and Neem Karoli Baba said, no, go back. This is, he said, this is the gift God will give to this century, eradicating the smallpox. So out of nothing, he asked this man, Larry Brilliant, to go. He didn't have any experience in epidemiology. He didn't have any experience in public health, but he went, and the second time he met an American doctor who came from Geneva with a program for healing smallpox or starting smallpox. And then the story goes that he was leading this Larry Brilliant, this man, this hippie doctor, was leading 175,000 doctors and people who were from 170 countries together in eradicating the smallpox. And he even said, Larry Brilliant had even, there are TED talks about him and all the miracles that happened. And he said, I had the privilege of seeing the last case of smallpox. As a young girl named Rahima Banu had completed smallpox in October 1975 and did not die. That was the last case in an unbroken chain of transmission of killer smallpox that went all the way back to Pharaoh Ramses and beyond, probably 10,000 years. So that stopped in 1975. We don't have such. How Neem Karoli Baba had this insight and sent this man. No? So solutions are for many situations which we consider that are impossible to resolve, and all this struggle, even with the coronavirus and many, can have also subtle reasons. And definitely, we all have the intuition that there are also subtle reasons for all this. But the openness to such possibilities and understanding how these subtle realms and the willingness, the openness, the transparency to that, letting yourself being inspired, is something that definitely human beings should learn to do. Meditating on Shambhala is something that can help us to be able to communicate with the realm of bodhisattvas, with the divine realms, and offer our help in a wiser way and in a more comprehensive way, and support the spiritual transformation of this planet. We will stop now. It's a funny stop also in the story. It said up until this point nothing special happened. So from now on, it will come even something much more fascinating. If there are any questions. Can we do a blessing at the end for the people in Ukraine, Russia, the world? Yes, we can, and we are doing actually every morning after the meditation, and I strongly recommend to you to do this every day as well. And any anger or any emotion like this, allow it sublimate in this discernment of compassion and wisdom. Bodhicitta, this conscious, illuminating consciousness, illuminating mind, sending that wisdom. Yes. Yes.
I've heard several people talk about Archangel Gabriel having a sword, like a sword of truth that you can pull down.
Yes.
And so would you say that that's the same kind of thing?
Yes. Yes, about Archangel. So the question was about similarities with the Archangel Gabriel. Definitely the same expression we can find in Christianity as well, and not only in Muslim tradition, in related to Archangel Gabriel. It's this, and also in even in the way in which it's structured, at least according to Osendowski and René Guénon, speaking about the king of the world, the lord of the world, about Shambhala, they speak about three kind of authorities. Is the spiritual authority, then it's a kind of administrative authority, but then it's an authority of protecting. So kind of military, but in a spiritual way, in this discernment way, authority. So this would be how this active compassion or compassion with this power of discernment can act indeed. Yes. Yes, and another question. What's the difference between Om Mani Padme Hum and the Kala Chakra root mantra, since they both refer to compassion? Is one more indicated than another? Well, the Om Mani Padme Hum, we spoke about this, the jewel in the lotus, and it's a more, I would say, universal expression of this unity of wisdom and compassion, and of Shiva and Shakti, of polarity. It's more, I would say, more of an exoteric mantra, because everybody is repeating it. The Kala Chakra root mantra is, the Kala Chakra mantra is more esoteric, is a longer mantra, which activates the chakras as well, and allows this communion with Shambhala. The mantra I'm going to give initiation is, it's as it is named, the heart mantra of Kala Chakra, is the core, which is a secret mantra, so it's not, you'll not find it in this text usually. And it's a short mantra, it's a bija mantra, it's just a seed mantra, it's not a long mantra. Still, the classical Kala Chakra mantra is a longer mantra, and as I said, it involves many aspects related to the chakras or the energies in different dimensions of our being as well. Also, how can we find the Upanishad you were talking about? Is that mantra to be said more than Rumi's prayer? Take away what I want, take away what I do, take away what I need, take away everything that takes me from you. They kind of have the same effect. You can set such an intention, but this is still at the level of the discursive mind. Oh God, take away this, take away that. And of course, this is a very beautiful, in the end, a sense of surrender, still expressed at the level of the discursive mind. A mantra which cuts all the attachments is something that goes beyond the rational mind. It's just the very pure vibration, the very pure energy that puts us in resonance with that transcendent consciousness, with that power beyond thoughts, beyond mind, that aspiration, that power or that realm of energy beyond any such attachments. Now, the Upanishad, Shurika Upanishad, I think it's a quite common Upanishad, so you may find it even on internet. I'm not sure. If not, we can provide you this Shurika Upanishad. But with the mantra is different. You'll not find it there. The questions are written down now, so it's good not to write long questions. In some Tibetan texts seem that Akshobhya family is the same as Vajra Sattva. Am I wrong? I have a Vajra wrathful deity on my wall and associated automatically with Akshobhya. It's Vajra family. Vajra Sattva, still it's a different bodhisattva, it's a different it's a bodhisattva, but the family, the leader of the family is the Akshobhya. There are these 5 Dhyani Buddhas, and under them there are bodhisattvas and dakinis and different other aspects. So it is named the Vajra family, but Akshobhya is the father of the family, and then Vajrasattva is a part of that family, but not the leader of the family in itself. So the 5 are Akshobhya, Padma Shambhava, Amitabha, Vairocana, and we'll come later. Amoghasiddhi. So these are the 5 Dhyani Buddhas. If there are no other questions, let's conclude with a short meditation with Shambhala. And also, we will send blessings to people involved in the war. So first, close your eyes. We bring the awareness in the heart. Evoking the realm of Shambhala, the presence of bodhisattvas, people of compassion, of perfect compassion. The longing to connect with them. And you open the eyes, meditating on Shambhala yantra. You can even feel that inner circle, like the phenomena source of Vajrayogini. The source of all bodhisattvas, of all the Buddhas, of all compassion, wisdom, pointing in our heart. And we project the yantra of Shambhala like a seal upon Ukraine, radiating light, compassion, bringing peace by stopping the invasion, bringing bodhicitta, illuminated consciousness in the heart of everyone. We gently open the eyes. With this, we'll conclude our satsang. I recommend to continue to meditate every day and with Shambhala, and to send this light of compassion to Ukraine and to all people involved in the conflict.